Many students are expected to attend, but since our time was 6 o'clock, I waited
Okay,
for
sir.
5 minutes.
Yes, sir.
So let us start.
Yes, sir.
So hope the unit number one is already covered and hopefully much understood better by Dr. Nandini ma'am. So I'll be covering today and tomorrow, the same time, 6 to 8, unit number two, which is titled or named as Indian Model of Management. So which speaks about what all different Indian ethos are there and how those could be made applicable to Indian circumstances. In fact, these 4 hours itself are comparatively less for making this entire complicated thing to understand, but then I'll try my level best to do that. This is already been told to you yesterday. These are the different course outcomes of this particular subject. So we are here 402.2, that is understanding, which is uh, connected with your unit number 2. So where we will be understanding, classifying and recognizing karma, which is a concept, then karma yoga, and discover its relevance to the business settings, how this karma yoga is connected to business settings, and how we would be able to illustrate the business ethical decisions rationale which are derived from Indian heritage scriptures. So the most important part in unit number 2 is Indian heritage scriptures like Ramayana, Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, etc. And that we try to sort it out today. These are the contents where we'll try to understand the concept of Indian model. We'll see in short while from now, which is based on some Indian socio-political environment, which was there earlier some 5,000, 6,000 years, and now it has been changed dramatically. But then, of course, it has got some basis of all these Indian scriptures. Then, as I mentioned earlier, law of karma and its relevance to the business settings. Whatever is the philosophy of law of karma, which is though to some extent a spiritual concept, but then many of the world people, they have understood and they've accepted that there is something called as law of karma which works very effectively, and how this law of karma and its relevance to the business settings. I'll be giving you a few examples from businesses so that you would be able to understand. Then Indian heritage and business management, that is also a part of this. Then production and consumption management lessons from Indian heritage scriptures like Mahabharata, Ramayana, etc. Though etc. not is written, but Bhagavad Gita becomes one of the core part of Mahabharata. So that also I'll be covering, though it's not mentioned here. Then leadership pointers from Kautilya Arthashastra, which is one of the famous book in India. And then we have got few models to be understood: Veda model, corporate Rishi model, theory K, and WE theory, that is West East theory. So these are the contents of unit number 2, out of which we'll be focusing more up till Kautilya Arthashastra. Rest all are very easy and for your comprehension as well as understanding. So hopefully whatever people are expected to join, I don't know, there are only 18. So we'll start and we'll continue. So to start with, there's a concept of Indian model of management in Indian social political environment. Now, whenever we say Indian ethos, that itself means the scriptures, the different kind of philosophies, different kind of way of behavior, social structures, which is based on Indian philosophies. And based on that, the entire Indian circumstances, Indian culture is built and developed. And as you may be aware that Indian culture, or to be specific, Eastern culture, is supposed to be one of the best cultures in the world as compared to Western culture. That part must have been covered in unit number 1. So I'll be very hurriedly going through it at the last of this unit number 2, which is also the part of this unit. So we need to understand that ethos are all such kind of basic principles or philosophies which are designed in India. And it has been found that Indian ethos focuses more on the principle that if you are good, the whole world is good. So how do you look at the world, and accordingly the world will look at you. What you give to the world, accordingly the world will give back to you. So that is a concept here. So this says that if you are good, you will see the entire world also good. And if you are bad, you will see the entire world also as bad. So here there's an incidence from Mahabharata. So probably you might have seen it in some of the serials which are happening on television. So this is Mahabharata serial, and I don't remember whether this incidence was there or not. But then, with reference to this particular principle, which we follow in Indian ethos, that incidence is there. The incidence is said that there is a big, people are gathered in this kingdom's king. ज्याला आपण मराठीमध्ये हे म्हणतो बघा, राज्यसभा म्हणजे तसं लोकसभा की जिथे लोक सगळे जमा झाले असतात. And then the king is there. He tries to sort out the problems of all the common people. So it is that kind of a gathering where all these ministers of king, then people, then employees of king, the entire kingdom is gathered, and it is a kind of darbar, ज्याला आपण अजून मराठी किंवा हिंदी मध्ये म्हणतो. So that darbar is there, and this is of course in Mahabharata. So where all these people from Mahabharata, characters from Mahabharata like Arjuna, Bhim, then Kauravas, and all these people are sitting. So Krishna, what it does, I presume that there are certain basic assumptions that that Mahabharata consists of Kauravas and Pandavas, and Lord Shri Krishna is one of the central character of Mahabharata. So Lord Krishna calls Yudhishthir, that is Dharmaraj, who is the eldest brothers of 5 Pandavas, and he calls him, and he says that Dharmaraj, you can just go around in the people who have gathered here. There are thousands of people around. Just go around and find out one bad person in the troop, in that entire group of thousands of people. You just get me one bad person amongst the people gathered. So Dharmaraja goes around. It might be taking somewhere around 10-15 minutes for him to go around. He comes back, and he tells to Krishna that Lord Krishna, there is not a single bad person in the entire group. Krishna says, okay, fine. Then he calls Duryodhana. So we know that Duryodhana is supposedly a villain in Mahabharata, provenly in the overall scripture of Mahabharata. So Duryodhana is supposed to be in typical Indian film language, we call him as a bad guy of Mahabharata. So this bad guy is told by Krishna, Duryodhana, just go around and find out one good person amongst this group. Of course, we presume that whatever Krishna told to Arjuna is not known to Duryodhana. So Duryodhana goes around, and then he comes back to Krishna, and then he says that I didn't see a single good person in the entire group of these 1,000 people. So the incidents remain the same. The people who have gathered, those also remain the same. Whereas Dharmaraja sees not a single bad person in the same group, and Duryodhana sees not a single good person in the same group. So that itself proves, though quite a philosophical story, but that itself proves that if you are good, the whole world is good for you. So within, if you have got a good philosophy, good culture, the entire world will appear good for you. So very often we come across the people around us that they will always believe on certain people. They will always have faith in others, because they always think that if I am not deceiving anybody, the person in front of me, he will also not deceive me, which may not be correct at today's situation or today's socio-political environment. So we cannot confidently tell that if we don't deceive somebody, that person in front of you will not deceive you. Because you are good, you think that whole world is going to be good for you. That is a basic philosophy, inherent philosophy, which we people possess, and which is supposedly to be there. But in reality, the things are not working out, because we are in amongst the 4 yuga which are mentioned, the eras, what we say. We are in Satya Yuga. That is, we are in Kali Yuga. Satya Yuga is when Rama was there. So Rama, everybody during that age or during that era used to speak truth, and then everybody used to come out with whatever is positively happening. But now it is Kali Yuga. Kali was supposed to be one of the demons, and so all the people who are around us may not be like following this particular philosophy. And that's why the people who are majorly bad, the people who have got very downtrodden kind of philosophies, deceiving philosophies, cunning kind of the nature, the people who are ignorant, so those people are seen to be improving more, or those people are seen to be say kind of being more successful. So this particular thing may not be applicable today, but somewhere there are still, we say there are still good people in the society. So if you do good to others, definitely something good will come back to you. That is a basic philosophy on which this entire subject and the entire Indian culture is dependent upon. So Indian ethos is principally derived from Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita and Puranas. These are the Indian scriptures which are being used and made some contribution to the subject. So Indian ethos places greater emphasis on values and ethics. Money is not at all a power. Just give me a minute. Yeah, so Indian ethos places or gives importance to or put an emphasis to values and ethics. So we always keep on talking. So I remember that there was one subject for you called as business ethics. So how these philosophies, which are designed in Indian society or Indian culture, created certain ethics and certain values for every individual, as well as for the group of the people staying in a society, and as well as the entire country as such. So India is known to be the country of values and ethics, as compared to majority of the Western countries where they may not follow all the values and ethics. They do have their own ethos. Like if you go to Western side like Europe, America, UK, they do have Christianism followed mainly. Whereas in India and most of the Eastern countries, we have got Hinduism which is followed. And far East, we have got Buddhism. So most of the Southeast countries, Southeast Asian countries, they do follow Buddhism. And all these isms, so to say, those are definitely having some kind of values and the ethics, basic principles based on that. So irrespective of which religion you belong to, irrespective of which caste you belong to, or irrespective of in which country you are born with, values and ethics are ideally supposed to be the crux or the base of any culture. But then that has been found very honestly followed in Indian culture, and we do not give much importance to money. We, in the sense, Indian people or Indian philosophies, not people, Indian philosophies. Whereas knowledge, good health, and sound character impart the real power. So the real power is amongst the knowledge which people possess. Then good health is being given a lot of importance. We have got yoga asanas, yoga, meditation, inhaling techniques, relaxation techniques. These all are contributors to the good health, and you may be aware and you should feel proud about it that all these yogas, yogasanas, meditation techniques, those are been found by research, developed and invented in India. So we give a lot of importance to good health, even including all majority of this Ayurvedic medicines, Ayurvedic practices. So those are being born in India so that we can have all the Indians and every individual human being having a good or sound health. And of course, the sound character. A lot of importance is given with reference to values and ethics to the character. Character is your behavior in the society, your impression in the society, and your oneness with your spouse. That is what the character speaks about. So all these three things, if you are having at one place, collated all the things at an individual level, that will impart a real power to you, so that you don't have to being feeling feared about anything or from anyone. And money is such thing which is given the least importance in Indian ethos and Indian culture. Well, though not related to ethos, but then Mahatma Gandhi ji has said, with reference to the first slide, that a Hindu should be better Hindu, a Muslim a better Muslim, and a Christian should be a better Christian. Because all these philosophies, whether it is Hinduism, whether Muslim or Islamism or Christianism or Sikhism, whatever different religions we do have, so those are always talking about the same philosophy. Though majority of these people, majority of Hindus, majority of Muslims, and majority of Christians might not have read Bhagavad Gita, Quran, and Bible respectively, but then all the philosophies of all these religions are one, and that is you have to be honest to yourself, you have to be good to others so that others will also be good. So there's one first slide which I've shown you, this one. So this philosophy is followed by almost all the religions, and if every individual tries to become better than what he is behaving today, then definitely something good is likely to happen. He has further said, with reference to Indian ethos, that I must confess to you that when doubts haunt me, when there are some doubts in my mind, when disappointments stare me in the face, means I could see disappointments, and when I see not one ray of light on the horizon, I turn to Bhagavad Gita and find a verse to comfort me, and immediately begin to smile in the midst of overwhelming sorrow. So whenever I'm in a sorrow, whenever I'm in a bad mood, wherever I'm disappointed, whenever I think that there is no way out for a problem which I'm trying to find out a solution, so who gives me the solution? It's Bhagavad Gita. And it has been proven that Bhagavad Gita is even read by Abdul Kalam, was of course read. He's not alive now. So he also used to read Bhagavad Gita and Hanuman Puran very effectively, and he has found it very much effective. Gandhiji further says that my life has been full of external tragedies, and if they have not left any visible and indelible effect on me, I owe it to the teaching of Bhagavad Gita. So how, with irrespective of whatever things have happened to me, how I am so much calm, balanced, it is only because of teachings of Bhagavad Gita. And it is proven that, of course, we'll be coming to that point later, that Bhagavad Gita tells you about being balanced in any kind of situation. So if you remember whatever we have learned about Mahatma Gandhiji in our history books in schools, you might have seen different kind of serials also. There was a serial, India, Khoj of India, India Ki Khoj, somewhat of that title, which was based on Nehru's book. So where Gandhiji was portrayed to a greater extent. And then there were many movies, out of which one of the famous movie, it was a Hollywood movie, Gandhi. And then it must have been told you what kind of suffering what Gandhiji had in his life, and with all those things, external tragedies. So he was not responsible for whatever happened to him, but then the external situations were so odd that he had to face all the odds throughout his life. And in all such kind of full of external tragedies, only Bhagavad Gita has helped him to not get deterred from his vision, not get away from his vision. And then he owes all this, he gives credit to being balanced in throughout his life through the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. This we will skip for the time being. If at all time permits, we'll do it tomorrow, but not now. So there's one small game on Bhagavad Gita, which I have seen it somewhere in some of the sessions. And then I found it very much interesting, and we can play that game. And the game is such that you have to ask me some question, which may be personal, which may be professional. And I will prove that Bhagavad Gita has got the answer to any of your questions. So that we will see tomorrow for the want of time, and probably few more people may join. So continuing with our discussion, so religion, what I just mentioned about Christianism, Islamism, Hinduism, and all other religions whichever are there in India or across the world. So religion does not mean dharma. So we usually call dharma means Hindu dharma, then Christian dharma, Muslim dharma, Sikh dharma, Isai dharma. So these are not dharmas. So meaning of dharma doesn't mean it is religion, but it is righteousness, it is charity, it is essence, it is duty, it is rule, governance, etc. What an individual or group of people are supposed to follow. So it is nothing to do with Hindu, Muslim, Christian, etc. It is something to do with an individual who is doing some righteous work, means some kind of pious work or good work, someone who's doing charity, then essence of, there should be off here, essence of duty, role, governance. So whatever I am doing it honestly, irrespective of whatever is happening around me. So the people around me might be too much ignorant, the people around me might be too much cunning, people around me might be too many deceiving people, non-trustworthy people, characterless person. But then as an individual human being, I must be able to behave good and follow all the ethical norms And this is the thing which has been told by all the dharmas, irrespective of whether you are a Muslim or a Christian or a Hindu or some another belonging to another religion. So religion does not mean, so I should have underlined or make this word not bold. So religion does not mean dharma. So these all things will be meant by religion. So Indian culture, what we call as a Bharatiya Sanskriti, it is your upbringing from your parents. No parents will tell you to behave bad in the society. You you might have been born in a very poor family, or maybe richest family, or maybe middle class family, in X religion, in Y religion, but none of the parents will teach you that you become a bad person. No parents would like their sons or daughters to be born with and be trained to become bad, unless that son or daughter joins some such kind of ill practices and ill activities, and he becomes unethical in the society. But otherwise, Bharatiya culture or Indian culture always is nurturing values like truth, righteousness, peace, love, non-violence, is true Indian culture. So a combination of all these and many more things which might come up during our session. Those are the things which are been building Indian culture. So we always speaks about, right from our childhood days, we have been told in schools, in colleges, and specifically even before going schools by our parents, the first thing that be true to yourself. Be always speak the truth. You might have been beaten by your parents for talking false or showing wrong results or talking something false about school and school teacher or maybe your friends, etc. So you might have been punished many of the times by your parents, because our parents, Indian culture, Indian parents would definitely try to make your child who's behaving true, who's always talking the truth, who's doing all such kind of righteous or good activities, then who's always try to maintain peace. You might have been punished again in the schools for fighting with somebody, because nobody around the world is ideally expecting to have war. So no fighting with each other. So have to have peace. If you fight with your classmate, then you might have been punished. Then spread love. Then non-violence is again not fighting with each other. So these are all few basic principles which our Indian culture tries to inculcate in every human being when that human being is a child. Even the thieves or dacoits as children, they are also not taught to do these kind of things, specifically by a mother, because mother is supposed to be the one who is helping the Indian culture to build. Therefore, India is called as a mother. Bharat Ma bolte. So it is because mother is the one who can develop such kind of positive things amongst the children. So these are all culture participants of our Indian culture. Then there is Upanishads, which I mentioned earlier. So they ask you to worship these four entities. One is your mother, your father, then preceptor and guest. So Matru Deva, preceptor is the ones who teaches you. Matru, Pitru, Acharya means your teacher, and Atiti means whosoever comes to your house, your guest. So we are supposed to respect, we are supposed to worship your mother, your father, your teacher, and Atithi means your guest who's coming to your home. Now in earlier days, I am talking about the days of Rama and Mahabharata. Whenever any Atithi guest used to come to anybody's house, he was given whatever he wants. He might be asking for food, he might be asking for shelter, he might be asking you to stay in your house for some days. Everything was allowed and everything was welcome. So guest is treated as Devo Bhava, means Matru Devo Bhava means mother is like, or mother is God, father is God, your teacher is God, and guest who comes to is God. And God was given a lot of importance in olden days. Even today also, all of us, or majority of us, I'm not saying all of us, majority of us do believe in some kind of God, maybe whatever God you might be worshipping. So we do strongly believe on that God. So like that, the basic Indian philosophy mentioned in Upanishad says that the first God is your mother, second God is your father, third is your teacher, and fourth is whosoever comes to you for your help, or asking for your help, or asking for something from you. You're supposed to treat him as if the God is asking to do that, and you're supposed to do that. But again, with reference to we are in Kali Yuga, whether the person who's asking in front of you is asking from a pious thoughts or any negative thoughts in the mind, so that you cannot guarantee or you cannot foresee, but then still you are supposed to consider that person as a god and try to fulfill what he's asking you to do. So Matru is your mother, Pitru is your father, teacher, and God. These are four things which are to be given respect or which are to be worshipped according to Upanishads. There is this Taittiriya Upanishad, is the name of that Upanishad. So Indian society also reverse the role of teachers, as the second last word in the earlier slide was you're supposed to consider Acharya means your teacher, the one who teaches you, irrespective of whether he's teaching you in school or colleges or maybe in PG, what you're doing right now. But it is not, we are not talking about those kind of teachers, that those are the teachers formally, but then anyone who teaches you something good, that can be that person can be treated as teachers. But of course, your school teachers, then your college teachers, your PG teachers, maybe if at all you decide to go for any further education, who's the person who's teaching you becomes your teacher. So those are the teachers who should be always worshipped for a reason which is here, because the teacher has got certain roles to be performed in the society, and teaching is the noblest profession of all, amongst all the professions around. It is also the holiest sadhana for self-realization. Sadhana is a kind of a meditation. So if you want to understand yourself, it is said that there's been very beautiful sentence about teaching profession, which says that if you want to learn, teach. So if I want to learn something, for example, if I want to learn this particular topic which you're discussing, if I want to learn Bhagavad Gita, I need to teach Bhagavad Gita, then only I'll be able to learn. Because when I want to teach you, or when I'm deciding to teach you, or when I'm teaching you, first I must understand, then only I would be able to teach you. So therefore, if you want to understand something, if you want to learn something, try to teach it, then definitely you will learn. For a very simple reason, because I can teach you only when I have understood it properly. Supposing, let's take the example of simple mathematics. If I am trying to teach you all those complicated concepts like sine, cos, tan, integration, derivatives, some of the science students here might be able to recollect that from your school days. So I won't be able to teach you if I have not understood it properly. So if I want to inculcate certain good habits in me, that is possible, and I have to do it first if I decide to teach to you. So it is not simply I will read it from somewhere, and if I'm teaching you, then in that case I have not done the self-realization. Self-realization is understanding yourself, understanding what is happening inside, understanding what kind of person you are, trying to understand what is your philosophy, what is your culture, what is your way of behavior, what are your ethical values, what is your philosophy of looking at the people around, looking at your organization, looking at your colleagues, looking at your superiors, because that is how you try to understand the entire world around you. If you want to know how the world around you is, first of all, you need to understand yourself. And then accordingly, with reference to again first slide, if you are good to the people, you will always see the people surrounded by you, by good people, and you may have, or you may get the power to change the people around. I can give you some example later in some ethical philosophies. So there, this point will be more clear. So holiest sadhana means the most purest meditation or a kind of concentration should be for self-realization, understanding yourself. And it is the teacher who will make you understand yourself. It is a teacher who will be telling you what are the things which you need to develop amongst you, what are the things which are lacking in you, what are the things which you still have to work on, specifically when the things are negative on you. So teachers play the majority of the role in your life. So teachers are to be worshipped and given importance because this self-realization involves the cultivation of selfless love and showering and sharing of that love. So whenever you have people around, specifically your close people like your mother, your father, your siblings, means your brothers and sisters, maybe your close cousins, and anybody, even your friends. So when you decide to love, that is again one of the basic fundamental principle of Indian ethos, that if you're loving somebody, it should be selfless love. You should not be expecting anything when you love somebody. It is not a kind of, we are talking about husband and wife love, that is also part of this love. So you shouldn't expect anything from this, from any kind of relationship, which is, I think, very much difficult to digest in today's, again, Kali Yuga. Because here, whatever we do, we have got some hidden purpose behind it. So even if we love our father and mother, or maybe specifically brothers and sisters, there is some hidden agenda behind this love. We love our spouses, so there is also some hidden agenda that he or she should also love me. If I do something to him or her, he or she should also be giving back to me. So whenever we are expecting some certain things back from somebody whom we love, that is not selfless love. So ideally, the cultivation which teachers try to do, that you might again recollect your school days. Your teacher will also be telling you somewhere during your recess time, or maybe whenever you go and meet him or her, she'll be telling you, whatever, what have you got it in your tiffin, give it to your friends. But then she will not tell you, take it from them. So it is always giving. Don't expect anything from the others whenever you are giving. It may be related to any other commodities which you're giving, or specifically the love which you're giving. So love should be selfless, and teachers are the people who will always be doing it selflessly. Have you ever come across any of your teachers asking something from you? Fees is a part of school, not the teacher. Teacher doesn't ask for any fees from you. So teacher will be always giving. He will always be showering and sharing that love to you, from the perspective that you should also do the same thing in your entire life. But unfortunately, that in reality, in today's world or today's era, it may not always happen. Rather, it is not happening, I would say. So love has not at all remained selfless. With even our close relatives, our blood relations also, there is some kind of intention behind being close to somebody, being close to some of your cousins. Also, there is some kind of hidden agenda, there is some kind of hidden expectation from that person, and there is some kind of fulfillment which you always expect from the other side by maintaining that relation, which is not taught to you by any of the teachers. So teachers will always try to teach you selfless love, showering and sharing. Even when supposing you are, say, brother and a sister in your home, your mother will always teach you to share. And it is said that your mother is the first teacher in your life. So she will teach you everything, right from the way to stand up. He will hold you, she will leave you, and you will stand on your own. Initially you will slightly shatter, but then at some point of time you will stand stable. Then she will ask you, okay, come, then you will start walking. So she will teach you. She doesn't have any expectation out of doing this. So therefore, mother is supposed to be the first teacher, and role of teacher is great in our Indian philosophical life. So teacher molds the rising generation. The rising generation is you at present. The future of India is you, because most of the youths, more than 67% youth are there in India. So you're going to be the next generation. So next generation should be taught all those things, being self-confident, being selfless love, self-reliant, depending on yourself, self-conscious individual. So you should be aware about yourself. Your inner sense should make you aware that whatever you're doing, this is not a good thing you're doing, and that it should ideally be stopping you doing certain kind of unethical thing. That is the reason why in your syllabus this particular subject has been put in, so that all the next generation is at least the management fraternity, because you are going to lead the industries. The industries are going to contribute to the economy of a country and develop a culture of ethical businesses. So the subjects like Indian ethos and this particular Indian ethos and business ethics, those have been included in the syllabus, because you are the next generation, and whosoever are the teachers teaching you, those are teaching you again from the perspective of selfless. A teacher doesn't expect, irrespective of whether he's a school teacher, college teacher, or your PG teacher, or if you decide to do a PhD, your guide, he is not ideally expecting anything from you. He might be getting a salary paid by a school, college, or PG college by the institute, but not you. He might be pushing you to pay the fees, but then he's not asking you to pay the fees to him. He or she will ask to pay the fees to the institute, and institute will give them the those fees back in the form of a salary. But then he doesn't expect anything from an individual student or individual being. So he will always try to teach you. Even when you think about your management teacher, say for example, giving presentations in the class, typical management activity which happens in all the colleges. So what has been taught to you is being self-confident. Yes, somebody has raised hand. Do you want to ask something? I saw somebody has raised Prahlad. Okay. So teachers will be always teaching you to become self-confident, self-dependent, and self-conscious individual. Self-dependent or self-reliant is depend on yourself. Don't copy, do not get help from anybody. So try to do it yourself, so that there might be some circumstance in your life in the future which will be making you alone, and then you might have to do all the things on your own. So you should be able to depend on yourself. You may be staying alone, so you should be able to cook for yourself. You may be staying alone, you should be able to do all your works, washing clothes, washing utensils, having all the cleanliness done on your own. So that is something which we call as self-reliant, and this has been taught to us since our school days. So therefore, our school teachers are supposed to be developing all those kind of great culture or philosophies amongst us. Therefore, a teacher is supposed to be an architect of happy homes, prosperous communities, peaceful nations. So wherever teachers are good, all our Indian philosophy has been developed. Mahabharata, Ramayana are been positive things that happen only because of those gurus, the form of teachers which were there. For Rama had a guru, Shri Krishna had guru as a Sandipani, Rishi Sandipani was Shri Krishna's guru. Rama's guru was Guru Dronacharya. So those gurus taught all the good things to the characters in Ramayana and Mahabharata, and that made the entire culture of those cities and the social structure at that time. Then Guru equips not only himself or herself with knowledge and skills to inform and instruct, but also has got the vision and insight to inspire, transform his students. So it is said that who is a good teacher, who teaches you or who tells you something is a teacher. Then who is a good teacher, who explains you is a good teacher. Then who makes you understand is a better teacher. And the one who makes you motivate is the best teacher. So you should be able to do positive things, and the teacher who is the person who will be able to make you do that, that teacher is supposed to be the best teacher. The reason is children absorb from the habits and manners, behavior and beliefs, the teachers and the elders. It has been very clearly seen even from your childhood that you try to learn from your mother first, and then when you start going to the schools, maybe nowadays you have got KGs and mini KGs and play groups. When I was a school child, these kind of things were not there. Directly used to enter into first standard. So now there are around 3 years before first standard in the form of play group, then LKG and UKG, lower KG and upper KG. So 3 years more you try to be in schools as compared to our generation. Our generation used to go to the school somewhere at the age of 5 or 6. Now you go to the school at the age of 2.5 to 3.5. So you are at least 2 to 3 years more in the schools, and you try to learn from the teacher, because mother, your father, your parents and your teachers are the one where children will be absorbing. They will be learning many things from them by simply watching what the people are doing. So teachers must excel. Therefore, teachers must be themselves first. They should follow humility, simplicity, morality, integrity, so that education results in excellence. So if as a teacher, if I am humiliating somebody, it means I'm not respecting somebody's emotions. I'm not respecting anybody's maybe a worse situation at that particular moment. Then I may not be a good human being, and I don't have any right to teach to students. I must be very simple. I must follow all the moral principles, and I must have to have integrity with the organization where I am working with. So if I don't have these positive characteristics, I do not have any right to teach those. It is what is said as practice what you preach. Means if I'm preaching means teaching. If I'm teaching something, if I'm taking you or talking to you that you must be good to others, you must be self-reliant, you should not deceive others. It is first I should be doing those things, and then only I've got right to tell you. Because if the teacher has got all these moral characteristics, then only those characteristics could be absorbed by the children. Again, here in this slide, we are not talking about teaching. If I am found behaving odd in the society, my students will definitely come and tell me, sir, aap kya aise behave kar rahe hain, humko bol rahe hain aise behave karo. So it is as simple as understanding that. So children will always observe you. Younger children or the children from management institute, they are definitely mature, so they will see, and they are likely to put this kind of blame on you. What is your behavior? You check your behavior, sir, first, and then you talk to us. And the people of your generation and post-graduation students, they do have that kind of daring, I would say, to go and talk in these kind of languages to the teacher. So teacher, irrespective of at what level he is teaching, whether he is teaching to schools, colleges, PG, and going ahead to PhDs and post-PhDs, etc. So the teacher must be, first of all, principled, ethical, moral, simple, integrity following, and following humility. Then only I can teach you, and then only the person in front of me, without teaching anything also, he will learn many things from you. Positive thing. So how much importance is for the teacher and education? This one slide, which you might have received on WhatsApp. This was a WhatsApp forward some 1 month before, which I put up here. So at the entrance of gate of the university in South Africa, following message was posted: destroying any nation does not require the use of atom bombs, the use of long-range missiles. It only requires lowering the quality of education and allowing cheating in the examinations by the students. So if you do this, if you lower the quality of education, if you allow people, students, I mean, to cheat in the examination, copying in the examination, then the entire country will definitely get destroyed, because parents die at the hands of such doctors, patients die at the hands of such doctors who are ill-educated, building collapses at the hands of such engineers, money is lost at the hands of such economists and accountants, humanity dies at the hand of such religious scholars, justice is lost at the hands of such judges, and the collapse of education is the collapse of nation. So you don't need to have, as written here, you don't need to have atomic bombs, you don't need to have missiles, you don't need to have even corona to destroy the nation. What is needed is just reduce the quality of education, try the schools and colleges to cheat each other, to cheat in the examination. Cheating in the examination in simple terms is copying in the examination. So once you copy, you have not really understood it. So the entire nation will be like this. All such kind of doctors, philosophers, engineers, scholars, judges, those will be produced, and the country will definitely be going to the dooms in a very lesser amount of time. If you can check with all the countries which are having a very negative record in the world map, those countries, you will see the kind of education which is given to them, or the quality of education given to them. Unfortunately, it is again proven by researchers in India that whatever negative things are happening in our country, to a greater extent, somewhere the basic or primary education is responsible. So if primary education is of rich quality, primary education is trying to inculcate all these positive things amongst the children, then they will definitely become a good nation builder. To give an example, I had been to Japan somewhere in 2014, so around 7-8 years before, and then I just inquired there. I was there for attending a conference for 15 days. I was there, and I just went to visited some schools and universities there, and it was a very surprising thing to know for all of us also. In Japan, for the school children, they do not start teaching A, B, C, D, and those letters which we have been taught right from the day one when we go to the school. For first 2 to 3 years, they do not teach any kind of scripts. मीन्स लेटर्स, ज्याला आपण अल्फाबेट्स वगैरे म्हणतो, त्यांच्याकडे कांजीज असं म्हणतात. इन जॅपनीज दे कॉल्ड एज कांजीज. दॅट इज अल्फाबेट्स इन आवर लँग्वेज. म्हणजे एबीसीडी किंवा अ आ इ ई. These are not taught to them. The children going to the school, first 2 to 3 years, they are being taught how to behave in the society. When they are on railway station, when they are on airport, when they are on bus station, when they go and visit the doctor, when they go and come across a teacher. So how you should behave in the society. That has been taught to all the Japanese students when they go to the school, before they learn the Japanese script, or before they learn ABCD, before they learn AIE. And I don't think that any of the Indian schools are doing it. So we need to improvise on the basic or primary education and quality of education. Then the world will become a great place, and specifically India. There was another concept in Indian ethos called as Swarajya. Swarajya means self-rule. Self-rule doesn't means me म्हणेल तसं तुम्ही वागायचं. It doesn't mean. It first of all means controlling yourself. So you should have to have capacity for dispassionate, that is objective. So you should be impartial, you should be unbiased. You should assess yourself all the time. Swarajya concept has come from Shivaji Maharaj, though it is not a part of Indian ethos. It was too much in a recent days, hardly 350 years before Shivaji Maharaj was there, and he came up with the concept of Swaraj. Swaraj means self-rule. Doesn't mean that behaving haywire, but then first of all having the control on yourself. And Shivaji's history, he is treated as management guru for many of us who are learning. It can be a part of Indian ethos, but then there is no scripture developed by him, so therefore it may not be. But then Shivaji was talking about self-assessment, assessing yourself, benchmarking yourself. There's a concept in management called as benchmarking yourself. So in this is the concept, since you all are in second year, you already know something called as performance appraisal. So when you go to the organization, or when you start working in a organizational culture or in industry, so there is an appraisal which happens every yearly or maybe 6 monthly. In most of the IT company, it is in after 3 years also. So what do? They check your performance, and they will always give you that this time, or in this appraisal you have got B plus grade. In your next appraisal it must be A, and to get that A you are been given more target. But then in the place of company giving you the targets of going from B plus to A, you yourself should be assessing that no, I've got B plus this time, I must have to get A grade next time. So this is a simple example, or simple, I'm trying to make the thing simplified. So self-assessment is you try to analyze yourself, where you are lacking, what are the things which you need to develop amongst you, what are the things which you have to improvise in your areas of specialization, where you need to learn more. So you try to assess yourself, compare with yourself. It is called as self-assessment or self-benchmarking. So benchmarking yourself is comparing yourself with yourself. So you try and compare your own performance last year. This year I need to give more better performance. Last year I was not knowing this. This year I am knowing it. So thanks to Corona that this Zoom thing is happening. But earlier, I think before last March 2020 rather, nobody was knowing this software. Nobody has used. But then it is want of time. So you need to learn other software which are available for such kind of things. A very simple example to understand, because last year this was not required. So this year it is required. Next year something MI will come up, then AI will come up, and we need to learn and adjust ourselves to whatever is happening around. It is assessing yourself where you are lacking, assessing yourself where you do not have your abilities, assessing yourself where you do not have competencies or potential to compare with somebody else. Whenever in our institute placement happens, you always try, you always get jealous about the person who gets placed, but then you never have thought of why that person could get placed and why you didn't get placed. So you need to do the self-assessment, because you were not effective in your interview. Why you were not affecting very much effective during the interview? Because you were not having the knowledge, or you couldn't answer the questions. Why you couldn't answer the questions? Because you didn't have a knowledge. Why you didn't have a knowledge? Because you didn't study. Why you didn't study? For so other reasons. So if you try to get the answer that why you do not get placed, the answer will boil down to you, and it will tell you that you are the reason, not the institute, not the placement faculty, not your teachers, but you yourself are responsible for that. So from that perspective, you should always have the ability and the habit of assessing yourself and controlling yourself. Then you should be self-assessment or self-ceaseless, means you should not be stopping doing anything. You have to keep on continuously doing things. Self-purification, improvising within yourself. Purify is, if you got some bad thoughts, you're supposed to clean those thoughts and make it more pure and more pious. And growing self-reliance. So depending on you. So if you follow all those things, then only you are following Swarajya. Swarajya is nothing to do with only dominating the people and making others to follow the self-rule, as most of the political people or the politicians want to do. That doesn't mean Swarajya. Coming to the very fundamental principles, there was this Bharat Muni, who was Indian theatrologist and musicologist. He has come out with a concept of Navarasa, which you might have learned in Essentials of Psychology for Managers, where there are 9 kind of expressions with every human being on the earth who's born on the earth in any country across the world, or 200 plus countries. He must be able to, rather he is by birth able to express with the help of Navarasas. Rasas means emotions, Nava means 9. So there are 9 kind of emotions: sorrow, hatred, disgust, then happiness, anger, and there are a few more, I don't recollect all. But then all those 9, if you can just give a search on Google, Navarasa, you will get the pictures along with some Bharatnatyam figures and facial expressions. So all those facial expressions could be seen on the face. All those 9 expressions we can have on the face. Veera Rasa is one, then Adbhut Rasa, Ashcharya is one. So I guess I have told you all 9. And these are developed by this Bharat Muni. He was basically a theatrologist, means a dramatist. Those people who are from Pune. So we have got a theater in Pune called as Bharatnatyam Mandir. So that Bharat name is given after this Bharat Muni, who comes from our history. And then there was another Bharat, King Bharat. And based on this King Bharat, our country is known as Bharat. And he was descendant of Adi Pandavas from Mahabharata. And he was son of Dushyanta and Shakuntala, one of the famous characters of mythology, on which Kavi Kalidas or poet Kalidas has written a very big creature or scripture by the title Meghadut. And that is is said to be one of the biggest poem in the world. And it speaks about Dushyanta and Shakuntala affair, love affair, what we say in typical today's circumstances. So it speaks about this couple and how they fall in love with each other and how they got married. Of course, both were belonging to the kingly families, and then they developed the entire country or the culture at that time. So Dushyanta and Shakuntala had a son who was a very brave son, as you could see in these pictures. So he was so brave that as a child, he used to play with tigers and lions and all the wild animals And so because of his braveness, our country is named after Bharat as Bharat. And Bharat Muni has nothing to do with naming our country as Bharat, but then it is King Bharat, after whom our country is named as Bharat. And India is an English translation. I think India is the only country where Marathi and English names are different, whereas rest all countries, they have got the same name in their own language and in English as well. Then we are talking, Indian ethos is talking about spiritual leadership, which is also translated in Sanskrit at Rajarshi. It is a combination of Raja, that is a king, and Rishi is a sadhu or a monk, the person who doesn't have interest in all such kind of families, then getting more money, getting more and more purse benefits, collecting the things. He's not interested in it. Whereas Raja is the one who's the richest person in that entire kingdom. So combination of these two will be helping. That is a very fundamental principle and philosophies which are Indian ethos as. Even if you talk about Mahabharata or Ramayana, there used to be always a rishi. There always used to be a rishi or a guru who used to guide that Raja, who used to guide that king, and the king used to follow whatever this guru used to tell you. tell that Raja. So all the kings at the older times, in the mythological times, they used to follow some guru, some rishi, some kind of elderly people, some kind of a worshipable person, and he used to guide Raja, and Raja used to lead, and that leadership was called as spiritual leadership. And it at that time also it used to be quinquennial convocation, that is repeating after 5 years assembly. So even that time also people have thought of Raja or the kingdom in chargeship has been changed after 5 years. I think that is continuing, and that is happening in our political system today. So after 5 years there are elections, so that the king should be changed if the king is not behaving properly. That is a philosophy which has been used in today's circumstances still. But in these 5 years, ideally and philosophically and ethos wise, should be devoted to tyaga and seva. That means renunciation means you should not expect anything from the praja, anything from the citizens of the country, and you should do it as a service. That should be the ideal leadership of the politicians. But we see exactly both the things missing in our politicians. They do not do any kind of tyaga. They don't want to leave anything from them, and they are not here for service. That is a very unfortunate picture of our country. Though India is the only country where the fundamental or foundation is very much strong on all such kind of ethical principles, but unfortunately India is one of the top countries of having all these kind of negative things like bribery, then politics, and all these kind of negative things happening in our country. We are, out of 200 plus countries, India is ranked as 32nd as far as this bribery and political negative connotations are happening, as compared to all other two countries. So if we list first to 200, India is on the number 32 in the list as far as corruption is concerned. So no, none of the politicians, I would be making a very strong statement, none of the politicians are really doing any kind of tyaga, leaving something for the society, for the people, for the countrymen, for the praja. They are not doing it anything for you, and they are not at all serving you. They are not, they are there for seva. So I was just watching one video of one IAS officer. He has asked a very excellent question. He has asked that if politicians or if politics is a service to the society, then why politicians are paid salaries? Because when you are paying salaries, you are not doing service. I mean, you are not doing a seva. So when you're doing a social service, you shouldn't expect, so there shouldn't be salary. So when politics is a social or societal devotion, then why there is a salary? And if politician is a profession, then why there is no qualification? And we can see from the history of politics in India, anybody who is even zero educated can also become, go to any level in the ministry, because there is no entry qualification for fighting the election. So that question comes because these are the bigger question marks in front of our Indian political system, whether the politicians today are doing tyaga or seva. Are they renunciating anything? Are they leaving anything? Rather, they are collecting everything. Our politician, if you just see the statistical data of even a city like Pune or a majority of such kind of cities, metro cities, what we say, a simple Nagar Sevak, corporator. Once you become a corporator, you will have got at least 5 to 10 crore rupees of worth once you complete your 2 years of being a corporator. How this can happen when these people are paid the salaries of 20 to 45,000 rupees per month? How they can earn so much amount of money, so much they can grab all so much amount of wealth? How they can generate when they are paid a salary somewhere in lakhs of rupees, even for a minister? How we can have 300 crores and 400 crores of property? So it is a kind of open secret which we all know. But then who will bail the cat? That is a question in our country. Who is going to ask? And it is only because the people do not follow and believe in spiritual leadership. They do not believe in tyaga, they do not believe in seva. But then ideally, all the top leaders, even leader, not top leaders, even the leader at next level should also be doing everything from the perspective of tyaga and seva. And these are the two strongest pillars of Bharat's Sanatan. Bharat means the King Bharat, Sanatan Indian culture. So he was always a person, as mentioned in mythology, who always believed on giving out and serving to the society and its kingdom and citizens. And the same is supposed to be continuing. Then a few basic concepts which this King Bharat spoken about. These should be the 4 goals of every individual. Dharma is not religion. So living in harmony with creation and the society. So whatever is happening in the society, you should be following for the good of others. That is a default. Artha is generating wealth. So there is nothing wrong in creating the wealth, generating wealth. But then this wealth should be of good education, good health, good character, and then comes material well-being. And then comes all your money, then bungalow, your cars, then making a property for your next generation, etc., for oneself and others. But first you should earn the wealth of education, good health, and good character. Then you could go to these material well-being. That is artha. Artha, all these 4 words are Sanskrit words. Dharma, artha. Kama is satisfying your basic desires, which are extended part of artha. That is a life of comfort, health, enjoyment, respect for one's family and community. So basic desires is your basic bodily needs, basic pleasure needs, and those all you should try to fulfill. And that is what is called as kama. And moksha is attaining the spiritual fulfillment of liberation. Now, to make this simple, if you can remember the concept of Maslow's need hierarchy in our first semester's organizational behavior subject, the 5th level of Maslow's need hierarchy speaks about this part, attaining spiritual fulfillment or liberation. There's a concept of moksha, which simply means that you should do so good when you are there born as a human being that you will get a place only in heaven. So forget about it, because most of us may not believe on this concept of heaven or hell, or none of us is really aware whether these really exist or not. So forget about what happens to you after the death, but then try to think of attaining the satisfaction to yourself, which is the last level of Maslow's need hierarchy. That is self-realization or self-actualization. If you can remember, that is the 5th level. So self-actualization means understanding what you have done in, like I am running 54 now. So what I have done in my last 54 years, and then I am very much satisfied in whatever I have been doing. If I have deceived somebody, if I have bribed somebody, if I have corrupted somebody, if I have taught something wrong thing to somebody, then at this age of life, I will always, which is said to be the fag end of the life, I will always feel bad about what I have done in my life. So there is no point in repenting at the age of 50, or when you're reaching to retirement, or when you're reaching to the end of your life. Fag end jise bolte hain. There's no point in repenting at that time that, oh, I shouldn't have behaved with somebody like this. Oh, now I repent that I should not have fought with you. And still, you do not want to come up further and say sorry. No, he should come to me. Then that is where I am not trying to attain this. So we're not talking about going to heaven or hell. That forget, keep those things aside. Whether we are actualizing ourselves, whether we are satisfied with our life, whether we think that people will be saluting you, people will be respecting you for what you have, what you have done in your life, and then people talk good about you, that is a self-actualization. And then at the end of everybody's life, you are supposed to reach to this level of moksha, means very satisfied, contented life without any kind of grudges against the life, or without any kind of repentation about the past, without any kind of feeling of guilt at the end of your life. So if you are able to do that, then definitely you are supposed to have reached the level of moksha, or attaining spiritual fulfillment or liberation. So these 4 things should be your goal of life, that living with harmony with the society or whatever is happening around, generating wealth. So material well-being is here, and then wealth of good education, good health and character. So when we're talking about earth, though it's talked about meaning of earth itself, the word earth in Sanskrit, Artha Shastra, is all things related to economy and money. But then here, the real meaning of earth is good education, good health and character. Kama, material well-being may be the part of kama. Then real money may be the part of your basic desires, making more money, getting more property, etc. That could be the part of kama, but not earth. Okay, so these are the 4 things which you're supposed to develop, or those should be the goals of your life, that you should achieve all these 4 things. based on that, there is Arthashastra just now, as I mentioned. The earth is money. And again, you should be very much feeling proud that Arthashastra is developed and budgeted in our country. It has taken a birth in India. So India is the birthplace of Arthashastra by the famous name Kautilyache Arthashastra, Kautilya's economics, right? So Kautilya was advisor to King Vikramaditya, that we'll speak about him a bit later. So this particular Arthashastra speaks about accounting, administrations and statecraft, more importantly, the philosophical underpinning of administration, because it has basically come from Kautilya, who was supposed to be, as I told you about, a Rajarshi. So he was a Rishi at that time. He was a monk at that time. He was basically a teacher, and he made the, he guided the king to, guide the entire kingdom and then making the good of the people. So he is, as I said, he is the finest management thinker the world ever produced, Kautilya, who is also known by the name Chanakya. So Chanakya himself is called as Kautilya. It is just like nickname, another name for Chanakya. So he was a teacher, as I mentioned just now, teacher in the monastery, that is University of Takshashila. It's in English, it's called as Taksila, but it's Takshashila. So he was a teacher in that university. And the universities that time were not like universities today, where you go only for the documentation purpose. The universities used to be like, the students used to go and stay in the universities. So Gurukul system, what we say. So that kind of system was there at that time. There was no any kind of certificate given that I'm holding MBA degree, I'm holding BE. No certificate was given. It's only the knowledge and the skills and the developmental part was given importance. So it is that time, it is before Christ. So Kautilya or Chanakya was a teacher, and he has played a vital role in establishing first empire of Chandragupta Maurya, which was one of the historical king. So, so he says, means that was a philosophy of Kautilya, that in the happiness of the kings, there is a welfare, and in his welfare, there's a welfare of the people. In simple terms, if the king is happy, then only he can make the people in the kingdom happy. If the king has got a lot of money to use, then only he will be able to use it for the benefit of the society and the citizens. But is it really happening? Again, just now, 5 minutes before, I was discussing about the politicians. Is it like that? Do they use the money for the benefit of others? Definitely no. Rather, they will start with some kind of a trust where it will go under ATG, and they will start to get the money, collect the money from the people under that trust, and they will use that money for all such kind of corruptive practices. So kings today means the different kind of ministers or politicians, starting from very basic level of corporators, they are supposed to be like king. So first of all, they should be happy. Most of the time they are not happy, so they cannot make the people around happy. If they have a wealth, they are not ready to use the wealth for the benefit of the others. There might be some rare exceptions. I'm not saying that all the politicians and political people are like that. But again, study and research in India says that around 76% of the politicians are like that. So 23% might be fitting this particular category. But then that 23% is a very small number for a country like India, very big country like India. So king's happiness will decide the happiness of the country. The king's welfare abilities will decide the abilities of the people who are in that kingdom. So the king should be happy. The king should have a lot of amount of money for the or property required for welfare. The king should be wise and he should be virtuous. Virtuous means he should have best qualities to being a king. Again, I would like to definitely give an example of Shivaji Maharaj, who was supposed to be the most virtuous and wise king. He's been devoted all across India, typically in Maharashtra. We talk about King Shivaji Maharaj as our God to a greater extent. And then he's been proven by different kind of things, what he has done in his kingdom, how he fought different kind of wars, how he won all these kind of establishment. So what philosophy he followed, what kind of strategies he followed. He's also called as a strategy guru. He has got the best strategies to win against the enemy with lesser amount of people to fight for Shivaji as compared to the big troop fighting for the other party. So there are a lot of things to be learned, and we may have the separate subject only on Shivaji Maharaj as a management guru. Some people are studying on that. So if you could see Shivaji's history, all the people who are staying in that kingdom were very much happy because the king was happy. The king was looking after the welfare of the people. The king was wise. He was very much virtuous. Virtuous means having different positive qualities. He used to worship again. Why Shivaji Maharaj became so successful? The history has proven that he always used to listen to his mother. And right at the start, I've told you that mother is the one who will develop the culture in you, and majority of the positive things inculcated in a child. So such as conquering the temptation of senses. We may be becoming in this sentence too much philosophical or spiritual. So let us keep it aside. For the timing, it will come up later. So continuously improving on self-discipline and learning. Being an example, Shivaji Maharaj was very famous for following all the discipline. Whereas we have got many indisciplined drivers on Pune city or in across Maharashtra with Shivaji Maharaj written on the backside of four-wheeler, and the person is following all, violating all the rules and regulations, no discipline at all. And Mage Villas, Raje, but then Raje never destroyed or violated any of the rules. He was very much disciplined. There are cases in Shivaji's history where there were very severe punishment of cutting the hands, which Shivaji has ordered, to follow the self-discipline and not bribing anybody, not following any kind of corrupting practices, not doing any underpinning activities. So to avoid that, Shivaji at the same time was a very disciplined and very strict king, because he wanted the entire kingdom to be happy and safe. And that can be possible only the king has got those kind of virtues. So the king should be cultivating intellect by associating with the elders and promoting welfare and security of the people. Again, if you see the history of all the kings earlier, including Chandragupta Maurya, these people used to have very brilliant people amongst their ministries or amongst their monasteries. So like King Akbar had got Navaratna, so 9 different intelligent people, including one of them was Birbal. So those intelligent people, all these kings used to worship those people. King used to listen to all over whatever they used to tell, and that is one of the reasons why Chanakya is known in Indian history as one of the best teachers and the developer of the entire empire, because Chandragupta Maurya used to treat him like his guru, like his god, and he used to listen. So that situation is expected to be in today's world, that whatever your teacher is telling you, you are expected to follow that, provided that the teacher is worth that. So Kautilya was that, and he developed Arthashastra. There is a very big, thick book of around 1,200 pages, which is written by Chanakya on Kautilya Arthashastra. And he has told all those principles, philosophies, which we are learning in economics and finance today, was already developed some 3,000 years before Christ. Then these are the some of the Indian philosophical concepts or socio-political concepts related to these Sanskrit verses, and each one of them have got very simple and very easy concept to understand. We'll see it one by one. We can just take a 3 minutes break. If at all you want to take tea, at least I need it. I'll just get a tea for me. You can take a break of 3 minutes. And still your tea. Okay, so yeah, as I was telling you, these are the 8 concepts, as I would say, in typical Sanskrit we call as Subhashit. Subhashit means the one which speaks good. So these are the 8 Subhashits or concepts in Indian model of management, which depicts or which talks about Indian social political environment, and that should be the philosophy with which even we should be behaving even today. So these are 8. The first is taken from Upanishads, though I forgot to write it here. Second is from Rig Veda, and all these where these numbers are there in the bracket, these are from Bhagavad Gita, and these are the chapter number. So 4th chapter in Sanskrit is called as Adhyaya. So out of 8, 6 are from Bhagavad Gita, 1 is from Rig Veda, and another is from Upanishad. So as I said, we'll go one by one. First is Paropakarartham idam shariram, means our body is for the benefit of others, not for yourself. They have given a very simple example that sun gives light and warmth Flower gives smells, cows will give you milk, river will flow, and there are many benefits of river water. So what as a human being or individual we give out? So if you see all these sun, flowers, cow, then different natural elements, they will give something back to the society without expecting anything from you. What a flower expects from you? Nothing. What sun expects from you? Nothing. What river expects from you? Nothing. But human beings, rather, we always have got this first question, what is there for me? We don't think that what we are giving out, so why not this? So the question with reference to this is, why human beings are not thinking about para upakara? Para means other person, upkar means benefit. So what you're doing for the benefit of others, this your entire body is made, structured, designed by the God to help others, not for yourself. But in reality, we're not doing it. There's a concept, something called as OCB in our management, which says organizational citizenship behavior, which means a behavior which is not a part of your formal job requirement. You know, whenever you join any company, they will give you a JD, job description, or in simple terms, we call it your job profile. So they'll tell you what you're supposed to do. That is a formal part. Whereas OCB says that it is your behavior which is not defined by that designation, but it promotes more your effectiveness, who will be going beyond the formal job requirements. So as a part of job responsibility, I will follow all those things because it is the salary is paid to me by the organization because I am doing my job duties. But then what you are doing, going beyond your job requirements for the benefit of the organization, that is what it is talking about, organizational citizenship behavior. OCB is a concept. So you have to think about, as an individual, how do you practice OCB? If you are working with the company, then very often that not you will always have got this question in your mind, that companies pay me only this much amount of salary, so itne paise mein itna hi milega. We won't try to go beyond because we have got always that inhibition in our brain that I'm paid less. You might be paid 3 lakh rupees a month, you will still get a feeling that no, I'm paid less, because you always compare yourself with somebody else. You never have thought of that if the company is giving you 3 lakh rupees of a salary, whether are you worth of it, and then how much amount of giving back is there from your side to the organization. That matters a lot. That thinking nobody is having in his mind, but everybody thinks about what is there for me, what company is giving to me, rather than what I'm giving to the company. So you should be going beyond the formal job requirements, beyond your job profile, beyond what is defined in your offer letter, and then outperform. So these employees are supposed to be outperforming, means performing beyond their expectations from you by the job requirement. So those people are supposed to be following OCB, and unfortunately we have got very rare people like that. If I say that percentage might be less than 10%, so you may be deciding yourself whether you want to become amongst those 90% who do not do OCB, or whether you want to be amongst those 10% that what you do to your company matters a lot. So self-interest, transcendence, excellence, and so how you use your qualities. So again, with reference to management, there was a concept called as Johari's window. If you can remember, Johari's window was talking about what you have and what you can see and what others cannot see. So you know there are certain qualities and there are certain abilities and positive things in you, but then you will purposefully keep it according to Johari's window called as hidden self. So you'll keep it hidden, because if I tell to somebody in my company, then definitely they will burden me with that work. Just the काम तुम्हाला करावं लागेल. So better I won't tell them. For example, I'm a good photographer. I will not tell to my organization, because every time there is function, they will ask me to use my personal camera, which I bought it for 80,000 rupees. Why should I use my camera for company's work when I'm not appointed as a cameraman? But if you're doing it, then you are following OCB, which is not your job requirement. You are there, as let's say a marketing executive or production supervisor, and your job is not of a photography. And if you are not doing it, then you're not doing OCB. But if you're doing it, you are following OCB. So what simple terms in this summary of this slide is what different or extra you are doing as compared to what you're expected to do formally. That's what OCB says. So what paropakar, what you're doing for the benefit of others, that matters a lot than you do it for the benefit of yourself. So with reference to this, What are you doing as a human being that should be thought over? Another example is here from the trees. What the trees expect from you? Nothing. But then what do they give? They will give you monsoons guaranteed. A lot of cutting down trees has curbed monsoon. Then it will absorb noise, a good acoustical agent. They act as coolest shade. You can take the shelter under them. Free flowers, free oxygen. Then because we know that trees will leave out oxygen during the daytime. Nighttime they might be leaving out carbon, but daytime they give you free oxygen. Then new improved climate, ecological balance is maintained. Then this global warming can be stopped. Then they will give you, I cannot read this, free bird songs. Then they will give you 100% pure air. They will give you fruits also, free that too, and free global cooling. These all benefits are there out of tree, and you really do not have to even look after few of the trees, majority of the trees. Simply plant the trees and trees will grow on their own by nature giving them water in the form of rains and sunlight. So they take the oxygen and the required nutrients for growing the tree from sun and water and wind to some extent. They will grow on their own. They don't expect anything from you, but they are there to give you. So this is again one example which I happened to get it somewhere. But then again, the question remains, what as an human being, what as an individual you are ready to give to others? Forget about others. What are you giving to your family members? That question you ask to yourself. And if you got one answer, positive, then you are following me. We can presume that you are following this first principle. Second says, Atmano mokshartham jagat hitaya, means for the liberation of the self and for the good. So whatever you're doing, again, you should be doing from the perspective of giving out. So as written here, Swami Vivekananda has come up with the philanthropic approach. Philanthropy is, the word has come from philanthropos, means the people. So you should always have to have a approach which is inclined towards welfare of the people. So whatever you should be doing, not as a king, but as an individual, it should always be helping the society, and that approach has to be there. Jagat Hitaya means if the world becomes better, you will also become better. So you should try to give your best thing to the world. Third is Yadnaya Charataha Karmaha, means how much you are sacrificing. You have to sacrifice. And there are different kind of yagna. Yagna means Yadnya in Sanskrit. You might have seen in some of movies, the Yadnya karta se एक असं काट्या कुट्या गोळा करून ते जाळ लावतात आणि त्याच्यामध्ये काहीतरी ऑफरिंग्स तूप टाकतात, त्यानंतर बरेचसे काही फुले टाकतात, त्यानंतर अजून काही अन्नधान्य वगैरे त्यामध्ये टाकतात. सो दोज आर सॅक्रिफायसेस विच वी गिव्ह. तर ते सॅक्रिफाईस कुठल्या कुठल्या प्रकारचं करायचं? तर ब्रह्मयज्ञ इज स्टडिंग अँड असिम्युलेटिंग द सेक्रेट टीचिंग्स ऑफ वन्स लाईफ अँड conveying the experiential knowledge to others. Whatever positive, good experience do you have that you are supposed to teach to somebody else, then you are supposed to be following Brahma Yagna. The one supposed to be the best yagna or best sacrifice you should be doing. Manushya Yagna means serving fellow human beings, feeding guests. Acharya Devo Bhava means whosoever is coming. Atithi Devo Bhava, sorry. Atithi Devo Bhava is talking about feeding guests. Whosoever guest comes, now guests, typically you are not expected to take the meaning of guest. Guest means whosoever comes in front of your home. It may be a beggar. It may be somebody who's asking something from you, some help. Maybe a kachra wala person who's collecting all the kachra from your society. He's asking something from you. You're supposed to help him. Not always in the form of money. You can give him food. You can help their children to teach. So there are many such people who are doing some kind of social work of teaching poor people, teaching the people who are staying in the slum area. That is where they are doing Manushya Yagna. That means serving human beings, serving people around, serving the civilized people around. Pitru Yagna means honoring one's ancestors. You know, we have got a concept in Hindu philosophy, ज्याला आपण पितृ पक्ष म्हणतो. So Pitru, by literal meaning of Sanskrit, is your father, but then another hidden meaning is all your ancestors, your father, forefather. We don't say foremother. Forefathers means your earlier generation, earlier to our generation. So you have to honor, and during that Pitru Paksha, which is I think in the month of September, you recollect, you remember your forefathers and you worship them. So like that, you should be worshipping, honoring not only your parents, and fathers and forefathers, but all the elderly people of that age. If you're honoring them, then you are following Pitru Yajna. Then Bhuta Yajna means again serving the living beings other than human beings. So all other animals, the amphibians, the animals which are there in sea, animals which are there on trees, birds. So you have to help them. So you have to help all these creatures, offering them food and whatever their requirements are there. Then you're following Bhuta Yajna. And Deva Yajna is worshipping the cosmic power, or believing at least in the cosmic power. There is some power which may not be seen. You cannot see that power, but then it is driving the entire force for this entire world to happen. So there is some power which is, according to philosophies, it is said that there are many such powers where science do not have any answer. Why this XYZ thing has happened? Not all the happenings have been answer found in science. So all such kind of cosmic powers, some kind of abstract powers which will make the entire world and entire this human beings and the entire earth to run. So if you believe on such kind of powers, if you worship on such kind of powers, the kind of destiny or any god which you believe, then you're doing a Deva Yajna. So you should have to have sacrificing with all these different ways, helping, then teaching, then giving food and offerings to this, then honoring, and then worshipping. You're giving some kind of sacrifice from your side. You are giving out, not taking anything in any of these. Then you are following this principle, Yajneya Charita Karma, means whatever work you're doing, that should be done from the perspective of sacrificing. You should not honor your elders because somebody has told you. You should have to have that feeling in your mind that I am doing this task, I am doing this work for my benefit, which is going to help me in the long run. Fourth philosophy is Parasparam Bhavayanta Shreya Parama Vapsyata, means may we assist and satisfy and please one another to attain the highest good and welfare of all. So it is, there is one university in Pune by the name Symbiosis. So the meaning of symbiosis is this: helping each other, tying together and coming together and doing some kind of a good work, maintaining ecological balance, CSR. CSR is all the corporates are supposed to do corporate social responsibility activities. Again, this has got a very strong reference in management, that in 2010 Companies Act, this amendment or change is made that every company who's having more than 5 crore rupees of profit, every company who is having 500 crore rupees of turnover, and every company which is having 500 crores of capital worth of that company, it is compulsorily asked these company to spend 2% of their 3 years average profit on CSR, corporate social responsibilities. Means every company who is existing in our country is because of the customers, and customers are the ingredients or part of the society. So the company or the corporates or the businesses exist because people and the society exists. So they are supposed to give back to the society in the form of CSR. So it has become mandatory, compulsory for these companies to help the society in different forms, helping poor, helping women and women empowerment, then helping poor people, helping the people who do not have parents, helping the old age home, etc., helping education to grow. So there is a schedule in Companies Act which is talking about 10 activities under CSR, and those activities are made compulsory for all these companies. Tatas and all few of such good philosophical and ethical organizations were doing before this act came. They started doing somewhere in 1930s when this act came into 2010, almost 80 years before they were doing. So it is because they do have a philosophy of developing the society and giving back to the society, which is not there in majority of the businesses which are started. Businesses are said to be there for the profits, no doubt. According to management philosophy, finance and economics, the world economy is dependent upon economics of all the countries. So our country also should grow on the economy which is dependent on the money. So therefore, all the businesses should make profit. But then the intention of the business should not be making profits. Profit will keep on coming to you if you are doing good. That is the philosophy which this particular principle speaks about. So you satisfy people, people will also satisfy you. You try to satisfy your customers will also be happy for you, and you will have a loyal customer. So it is exchange of good things. That is what this principle speaks about. And the concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, again, as I mentioned about symbiosis, I'm not marketing for them, but then that is a basic principle or basic philosophy by which they have formulated the group. So Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam means the entire world is your family, and you have to treat the entire world as your family, and so that every person in the world becomes your family member. And usually with our family members, we do not behave absurd, or we do not behave out of or eccentric. We don't behave. So we try to love our family members. So therefore, if you treat the entire world, you will be calm and quiet and lovable to all the people around. Fifth concept is yoga karmasu kaushalam, means whatever you do it with kaushalam, means skillfully. You do it skillfully. So that is the words such as dexterity, flexibility, excellence in action. What is talked about is skill development. So whatever you do it accurately, do it precisely, do it with devotion, do it with concentration. Don't do it for the sake of doing. It may be like attending this class because somebody has made it compulsory at 6 baje ka class rehta hai, but then chalo attend karte hain, attendance will be marked, but then it is made us to attend. Don't do it for that. So tomorrow I won't mind even if there are less than 25 students, but those 25 who are attending, those are attending because they want to improvise on their excellence. They want to improvise on their actions in the future, and they want to develop certain skills. Now what we are talking in this particular unit or this subject is not a skill. If you understand the purpose of this particular subject or this course, you will be developing yourself. No skill will be developed, but then here you will get developed, and you will have got better philosophy, better way of life, better understanding of life, positive thinking, and all you're thinking about others. So giving approach will be definitely development that will develop you as an excellent human being and a good citizen of our country. So this particular part speaks about whatever you're doing, do it with accuracy. That's so simple. So therefore, we have got a separate central government's department, NSDC, National Skills Development Corporation. It is based on this particular philosophy. We have got workers who are not able to do their work properly. We have got people working in a building construction industry. Sorry. They are not able to do their work properly. We have got surgeons, they are not doing the operations properly. So they have learned it, but then they do not have the skills. So therefore, till now, NSDC has developed skills and trained 2 crores of youth in our country, so that whatever they do, they are doing it precisely and accurately. And that's what this 5th philosophy says. 6th philosophy is very fundamentally taught to all of us as a childhood. Satyam nasti paro dharma. No dharma is higher than the truth. Truth is at the top. So at the end, only the truth wins. Satyasa nemi vijay hoto asa apan nemi manto. And if you see all, irrespective of the quality of those movies in Hollywood and Bollywood, the end is always where the truth wins. So always you can see the basic theme of all our Indian movies. It can be any, it can be South Indian, Tollywood movie, Bollywood movie, Hollywood movie. There's one hero, one heroine, there's one villain. And at the end of the movie, only the hero wins because he's always on the side of the truth. So truth always wins, with maybe that very raw example, but then it is a fact. So it simply means never go back on your words, never talk false, and never commit something false. Never go back on your words means whatever you commit, follow it. So God is Bhava Priya, means God likes to have your internal offerings. God will not be asking anything. That is again one of the negative notions which most of the Indians do have, that if we offer something to the God will give you much more things. The example could be Balaji temple. That is supposed to be the richest temple in the world, because people literally have seen on television. I had never gone there. That I've seen on television, people literally drop gold in the box which is kept outside, because they think that if we offer gold to this God, the God will give me 5 times or 10 times or 20 times of the gold or wealth. Might be true, might not be true. It totally depends upon how much you believe in. But then no God is in reality expecting any such kind of thing from you. God doesn't do any business with you. That's a typical thing in Marathi, or there might be some other philosophies also where we call it as a navas. म्हणजे देवाला आपण म्हणायचे की मला मुलगा होऊ दे आणि मग आम्ही तुम्हाला हे देऊ. So it is, God doesn't expect anything from you. What he expects is your internal feelings. What respect, what philosophies do have, what kind of belief you have in the God. That is the only thing which is expected from the God. God does not expect any such kind of money from you, any kind of offerings from you. God doesn't expect flowers. God doesn't expect all those, haldi kunku, gulal bukka. It doesn't expect anything from you. What he expects is your, whatever is there in your heart for and towards the God. And whereas human beings, they do crave for external. What is there for me? That I had spoken. This I'll skip for the want of time. This is talked about J.R.D. Tata. He said that I have often thought about that. The question was asked to him that in 1960s and 70s, as compared to some other groups, Tatas did not expanded much. They did not grow much as far as turnovers are concerned, maybe diversity or diversified products are concerned. Then J.R.D. replied that I have often thought about it. If we had done the same, some of the things then some other groups have done, we would have also been twice as big as they are today. But we didn't, as we'd not have done it in other way. So in simple terms, we always followed the truth. We did not do any unethical practices and unethical businesses as the businesses in 1960s and 1970s. I'm purposefully not taking the name of those businesses or names of those businesses which are founded or maybe grown up big by some of the unethical practice. I'm not saying all, but some of the unethical practice those businesses have done, and those have grown to such an extent that they surpassed J.R.D. Tata to a greater extent. And then J.R.D. replied, we know the way they have prospered. We could have also been double than that, but then we didn't want to follow that because we believe on truth and ethical practices of business. And for your information, that Tatas are supposed to be, or Tatas are supposed to be known as the ethical business houses in India. So dharme nidhanam shreyaha means no duty is ugly, no duty is impure. We always consider are wo pune hai, are wo kachra wala hai. But then if it comes to you, you should not treat any kind of work as an impure work. If required, you should be able to clean your own toilet. I don't know how many of you are doing it, but then you should not treat that work also as an impure work. Any work is always a pious work or a pure work. So therefore, at the time of Ramayana and Mahabharata, that's a typical Mahabharata philosophy. So there were only 4 types of people, 4 classes of people, or 4 castes of people. Now we have got probably some 150 castes only in Maharashtra. So that caste is based on the family in which you are born, whereas at that time there were only 4 kinds of caste which were based on your duty, the work, the task, the kind of activity which you're doing. That used to decide that what kind of what caste you belong to. So Brahman used to do all such kind of puja and holy work. Kshatriya used to protect the kingdom. Vaishya used to do all the businesses. Businessmen are all Vaishya. And Kshudra means all those people who do menial work or cleaning work. So the entire society, entire country, entire kingdom was divided only in these 4 categories. It was nothing to do with in which particular family you were born. It was only based on what kind of duty you're doing. And even the person who is considered as Kshudra or doing the Kshudra work was not supposed to be considered as a Kshudra as we talk about it today. So we have got many castes which are categories under Shudra, and then we have got a different treatment for them, different schemes for from government perspectives. Then we have got a typical families and certain caste and certain religions who are businessmen. Then we have got people who go in army, and then Brahmin is the same Brahmin word which we use in our country today. But then earlier days, during the time of Mahabharata, that is not the real meaning of the family in which you're born, but the kind of work which you're doing. So even if there might be somebody who's born in a Kshudra family, but doing the work for Brahman, he'll be called as Brahman. He was called as Brahman. Last is, Nahi kachat kshanamapi jatu tishtatte karmakrit, means there is nothing which can be done or you're doing by sitting idle. You really cannot do that. So due to the influence of hidden qualities, we cannot even for a moment remain without doing a work. Even if you are Sitting idle, you're doing something that you're sitting idle, or you're taking a rest. When do we sit idle? We do nothing. When we're exhausted. So when you're sitting idle, also that time also you're doing some kind of a work, in the sense that you are taking a rest so that you can get energized for the next work which you're doing. So why we should work? To purify our mind. What is the work? Work should always be sacrifice. How to work? Tyaga and service. Tyaga and seva. And what is the spirit of work? What is the motivation behind the work? Excellence and perfection. So if you do this, then you are automatically following. So you are, in a way, every time you are following any or the other of these four things. Or otherwise, whenever you're doing any kind of work, so you should be doing it by heart. You should be doing it from the perspective that I'm giving out something to the person who's likely to get benefited, or the organization who's likely to get benefited. I'm doing it as tyaga. I don't expect anything from. I'm doing it as a service, and whatever I do, I should have excellence and perfection. And then only it is said that karma yoga will happen. Then only you will be said to be achieving that karma as a target. So these are the 8 philosophies. In just last 5 minutes, we'll cover this up, and then we'll meet tomorrow again. Salient features of Indian social economical. So you should focus on the Indian social political environment that actually focuses on lifestyle. So there is a concept, again, to connect it with management. There's a concept called as QOL, that is quality of life. And it has been found that quality of your life depend upon QWL, that is quality of your work life. So the more better work life you have, the more satisfied, contented, and happy work life you have, your personal life is also going to be very much happy. So try to avoid confrontation, try to avoid fights, try to avoid disputes, quarrels unnecessarily at the workplace. Your personal life will also be happy. That is a basic philosophy of focusing on the lifestyle. Then focusing towards business policies. So considering the current business situation, the business environment should be favorable with all the ethical businesses. And then existence of human orientation and values, that is a fundamental principle of the entire subject. Hard work, truthfulness, obedience, good manners, peace, harmony, customer care. Why that is required? Because you know that we are here because of the customers. Mahatma Gandhi just said this statement that customer is king. When? In 1905. 115 years before he has said this statement, which is true today. That time it was not true, the customer, but then he has foreseen that. That's why Mahatma Gandhi is called as a visionary leader. So he could have the vision of to see after 115 years, 100 years, what is going to happen. He could see into the future. We do not know what is going to happen tomorrow. That's why we are not the people like Mahatma Gandhi. So he was supposed to be visionary, means who can see into the future. The future is, he could see that the future of the entire business is going to be based on a customer. So whatever customer wants, I have to give you. So customer satisfaction surveys, keeping your customers happy, call centers, why all these things are there? Because we want your customer to be happy and giving always best from your company. And that is based on human orientation and values. Simple living, simple thinking, again, with reference to same Mahatma. So he always, he was never wearing ties and blazers, after he came back from Africa. Very simple living, but high thoughts. That is the philosophy which we should follow. This is again one thing with reference to Tatas. So the people who are affected by coronas, the family lost these lives. So the whatever salary they would be drawing till 60 years of age, that will pay to their families, along with medical benefits and housing facilities. The expenses of their children's education till graduation in India will be borne by company for all those who are affected by COVID-19. So this is done by Tata, because they follow for only the giving philosophy, the philosophy of giving back to the society and back to their own employees and people working for them. There can be a separate, again, a session or a separate subject only on Tata's philosophies. So those are so much philosophical. I'll not read it. I'll be circulating the same PPT too. You can read it later, which is again all the same thing which I've been talking about since slide number 1. If you're good, the whole world is good to you. Then there is something called as law of karma. I'll just introduce this thing in another 5 minutes, not more than that. And then we'll meet tomorrow. So there is a concept called as karma is work or a task which you do. It's a Sanskrit word. Karma means kama. Kam means work. So whatever work you do, so for whatsoever a man soweth, the same shall he also be reaped. This is said by King James Version of Bible. So Bible also says the same thing. Quran also says the same thing. And the entire Bhagavad Gita, which is based on Karma Yoga, law of work. So as you sow, so shall you reap. Means whatever you sow the seeds, the same thing will come out. If you sow the seeds of apple, there only will be the tree of apple and no other fruit will come. So whatever you sow, you will get the same back. So if you do good to the people, you will get good returns out of it. Again, it comes to the same first principle where we started. That's what law of karma says. Then there's a concept of sanchit. Sanchit means whatever good things you are trying to accumulate. People today are trying to accumulate wealth, which is not sanchit. Sanchit means what you accumulate, in fact, what you collect. So there is this story which I'll tell you to end this today's session. There was a rich man who was so much rich that he has got abundance of money. म्हणजे आपण मराठीमध्ये म्हणतो ना, पैसा जाळला तरी जळणार नाही एवढा पैसा त्याच्याकडे होता. So once he was just traveling to some another country, and the person, the cab driver, and he was very rich. This is a real story of somebody, some Indian businessman. I don't know the name, I've forgotten that. So he went out of that cab and then he gave that cab driver money in whatever currency he was in the country. The cab driver gave him back the remaining money. He said to the cab driver, no, you can keep the change. The cab driver says, no, I don't want any extra money. Whatever I am due to get, whatever I am eligible to get, I will only take that money. You can keep this money back. This rich man got so much stunned by this particular small incident that he came back, and then he started thinking. He thought that someday I'm going to die, and then I know that whatever I have earned, this money, this all property, I cannot take anything to wherever I go, maybe after I die, hell or heaven. So he declared, and he has given an advertisement. He gave an advertisement in the newspaper that I want to take all this property, all this money with me after I die. So I want solution from somebody. So if somebody gives me the solution, he will get 50% of my property. I'll be giving it to him. So there were many people who came to him and giving some kind of suggestions, some impractical suggestions, taking all the things after he died with him. So there was one person who came, and then he gave the satisfied answer to this person. He said that, sir, you must have traveled to different countries. He said, yes, I have traveled to maybe more than 100 countries across the world. So when you had been to US, what currency you use? He said, dollars. Okay, then when you had been to UK, what currency you use? He said, pounds. When you had been to yen, Japan, yen I use, Malaysia, ringgit I use. So he said that whenever you go to any country, you have been always using the currency of that country. So if you want to carry whatever you have right now to the place wherever you're going after the death, so you will be going to treat it as some another country. So they have got a different currency, and that currency is a sanchit, means what you collect is your good work. So you try to increase more of your good work, accumulate more of your good work, and that you can carry it as your property when you die. And that is where the concept of sanchit. That is why, again, coming to the first slide before I end, if you do good to the people, the good things will happen to you. So you have to keep on doing good things to the people around, irrespective of whosoever that person is connected to you, related to you, not related to you. So try to accumulate good things so that only good things will happen to you. That's what law of karma says, right? It ensures accountability. And Vivekananda said about this law, all the strength and support we want is within ourselves. So again, we have to depend on us. We have to depend upon what we are doing, and we should be giving back to the society with that piousness and as an outcome of what we are good at doing. So we should always be excelling with considering that whatever I'm doing, I am accountable for that. If I do bad, then somewhere I am responsible for that. If I do good, then definitely I'll get benefit. So that is a concept of law of karma. And I shall end with this statement from Bhagavad Gita, which says, Uddhared Atmanatmanam Atmanam Avasadhet Atmaiva Atmano Bandhur Atmaiva Ripunatmana. Means you yourself is your friend, you yourself is your foe or enemy. So if you think negative, only negative things will happen. If you think positive, you will be helping yourself. And that's what law of karma actually works out. Okay, so even if I started late by 5 minutes because I was waiting for the people to join. So I may start 2, 3 or 5 minutes late for people to join, but then I always end on time. Still, I have taken 2 minutes more. So tomorrow also we shall start sharp at 6 o'clock. We shall be able to finish by 8 o'clock. So join on time. And I'll be circulating this PPT later to you after tomorrow's session. And you can come out with the questions for today's session when you join tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. It was very useful, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Hope so.